She was once the darling of Silicon Valley, a visionary entrepreneur who built a tech empire from her garage and sold it for a staggering $100 million. But behind the applause and headlines was a truth far darker. The sale destroyed everything she loved. In this video, we dive into the twisted reality behind a dream exit that turned into a personal nightmare. The rain never stopped in Portland. It was the kind of cold, incessant drizzle that made everything feel heavier. Your clothes, your thoughts, your dreams. For Emily Barrett, those gray skies became a kind of cocoon. Within the cramped confines of her apartment above a second-hand bookstore, lit only by the glow of a second-hand monitor, she began building the code that would change her life. Emily wasn't the kind of genius you read about in glossy magazines. She didn't drop out of Stanford or inherit seed capital from a wealthy uncle. She taught herself how to code between shifts as a barista, memorizing Python syntax on her lunch breaks and debugging lines of JavaScript in the bathroom during 10-minute smoke breaks. Even though she didn't smoke, she just needed a quiet place. Her obsession began with a single question: why does managing money feel like drowning? She wasn't broke in the romantic sense. She was drowning in overdraft fees, student loans, and the kind of debt that quietly multiplies when no one's watching. She realized she wasn't alone. Most of her friends, teachers, artists, single parents were equally lost, surviving paycheck to paycheck in a system built to keep them confused. So she built something. She called it ClearPath. It was simple, elegant, a tool that didn't just track your money, but talk to you like a friend. You're about to overspend on coffee this month, the app would say. Or, if you skip delivery twice this week, you can clear that credit card faster. It was honest, non-judgmental, and terrifyingly effective. The first version was a mess. The interface looked like it was designed by a blindfolded teenager, but people used it. Friends shared it, and then strangers found it. And then blogs wrote about it. A financial advisor from Seattle tweeted that ClearPath saved his marriage. A mother of 3 in Ohio said it helped her finally understand her spending. Emily started waking up to hundreds of new downloads per day. But growth came with a cost. Her modest server setup collapsed under the pressure. She maxed out her 4th credit card just to keep the system online. Her apartment, once filled with light and music, turned into a silent lab of energy drinks, half-eaten takeout, and the quiet hum of machinery. And then there was Michael, her husband. He had married a dreamer, not a founder. In the early days, he believed in her, even stayed up to help her write copy and brainstorm features. But as the months dragged on and the bills piled up, the warmth between them turned cold. He began to resent ClearPath, and by extension, Emily. You care more about your users than your own husband, he said once, slamming a cupboard door so hard it cracked. Emily didn't respond, because in that moment, it was true. The tipping point came at a tech meet she almost didn't attend. Burned out and desperate, she delivered a 5-minute pitch about ClearPath to a room full of men in Patagonia vests and expensive sneakers. She spoke fast, too fast. Her voice cracked. But when she finished, there was silence and then applause. A venture capitalist named Tara Ling approached her after the event and said 5 words that would reroute Emily's destiny. Let's take this global. Together. Tara invested $1.5 million within 2 weeks. She moved Emily into a co-working space with real desks and functioning bathrooms. Overnight, Emily became a CEO, not just a coder. Not just a woman with an idea, but a founder with a team, an app. On the rise and eyes watching her from every angle, ClearPath grew faster than anyone expected. By year 2, they had 7 million users. The Wall Street Journal called it the app that banks fear most. Emily was invited to speak on panels, give TED Talks, and mentor other women in tech. She smiled in photos, shook hands with billionaires, and wore makeup for the first time since high school. But beneath the surface, something was shifting. She began to notice odd meetings Tara would attend without her, legal documents she wasn't allowed to review, investors who started asking more about exit potential than impact potential. And one day, a quiet rumor began to circulate. Among the board, a major tech conglomerate, the kind that buys everything and leaves nothing behind, was interested in acquiring ClearPath. Emily pretended not to hear it. She wasn't building a company to sell it. She was building it to save people. But some people don't care about your mission. They care about your data. And ClearPath had data, deep, personal, behavioral data from millions of users who trusted it more than their own banks. As the rain continued to fall in Portland, Emily realized something was coming. And it wasn't just another storm. The letter arrived on a Tuesday, not an email, not a calendar invite. An actual physical letter, hand-delivered by a courier in a Navy suit who didn't speak, didn't blink, and left as soon as Emily signed for it. The envelope was heavy, sealed with wax, embossed with the logo of Helix Dynamics, a trillion-dollar tech titan known for two things: its ruthless acquisitions and its talent for making competitors disappear. Inside was an offer. 9 crisp pages of legal language outlining what could only be described as the dream. Exit, $100 million for ClearPath. No contingencies. No clawbacks. Full buyout. Immediate payment. Emily stared at it for hours. She called Tara, who already knew. Of course she did. They want everything, Tara said, her voice carefully neutral. Full ownership. Total integration. You walk away with the money, and they scale it globally. They've done this 100 times. Emily asked one question. Why now? Tara hesitated. They've been watching us for a while. But last month, our engagement metrics outpaced their own finance app. That got their attention. That night, Emily didn't sleep. She walked the city streets like a ghost, her mind spinning between elation and dread. $100 million. She could pay off her parents' mortgage, rebuild her marriage if it wasn't too late, start a foundation, fund women in tech, retire before 35. But something didn't sit right. She met with the Helix team in their San Francisco headquarters, a black glass monolith that loomed over Market Street like a digital fortress. The conference room where they sat her down was windowless, soundproofed, perfectly chilled. The man across from her introduced himself only as Victor, no last name. No smile. We admire your work, he said. ClearPath's behavioral data is years ahead of anything we've seen. Behavioral data, that was the first red flag. Not impact. Not transparency. Data. Victor slid a folder across the table. It contained projections, graphs, global expansion models. But something else too, a confidentiality clause that chilled her to the bone. It forbade her from discussing the app's original code, algorithms, or intent, even in private. Even with her own team. And it took effect immediately upon signing. What happens to my staff? She asked. Victor smiled. We'll evaluate performance after acquisition. And the users? He didn't answer. Emily flew back to Portland sick to her stomach. She tried talking to her team, but the legal clause bound her. She looked into her co-founder's eyes and said nothing. They knew something was wrong. They just didn't know what. Michael, her husband, was the first to celebrate when she told him. She hadn't seen him smile like that in years. You did. Did, he said, hugging her like she was still the woman he married. You beat the system. She wanted to believe it. She really did. The board pushed hard for the deal. Investors flooded her inbox with congratulations. Her parents sent champagne. Tech blogs called it a masterstroke by a millennial genius. But the night before the signing, Emily stood alone in her apartment, the same one she had coded. ClearPath in and stared at the blinking cursor on her laptop. She opened the codebase. Line after line of logic she had written when she was broke, terrified, and obsessed with helping people take back control of their lives. She thought about the single mother in Ohio, the advisor in Seattle, the teacher who emailed her saying the app stopped him from declaring bankruptcy. What would happen to them if Helix got control? Would they be protected or targeted? She knew the answer, but by morning she signed. She smiled for the cameras, shook Victor's hand, accepted the wire, transferred $100 million, and as the ink dried, so did something inside her. It started with the silence, the kind that creeps into your life when you're no longer needed. No more late-night Slack messages, no more coffee-fueled strategy sessions, no more Emily, what do you think? Just silence. Cold, clean, final dot within. The first week of the acquisition, Emily's company, her team, her dream, her fight, began to unravel. She was locked out of the codebase. Her admin rights revoked without warning. When she called Tara, she didn't pick up. When she emailed Helix's transition liaison, she received a templated reply. Per acquisition terms. Former management personnel are not authorized for platform modifications. The word former stung. 2 weeks later, ClearPath's website changed. The soft colors and welcoming interface were replaced with sterile blues and whites. The app's voice, once empathetic and conversational, now sounded robotic, sterile. Where it used to say, "You've got this," it now said, "Spending exceeds optimal behavior threshold." Emily watched as user complaints surged on. Social media. "The app feels creepy now," one post read. "Like it's watching me, not helping me." Another user accused it of manipulating their savings goals to push affiliate banking products. And then came the layoffs. In a mass. Zoom call scheduled. For 6:30 a.m., dozens of Emily's former employees were terminated. Some had been with her since day one. No warning. No gratitude. Just a generic HR script and a digital pink slip. Emily tried to reach out to comfort them, to explain, but what could she say? She had taken the money. She had signed the Zinda clause. She had walked away. Michael tried to celebrate. He booked a trip to Paris. Bought a new Tesla. He said they should finally try for kids. But Emily couldn't breathe. The walls of their penthouse condo, a place they couldn't have dreamed of affording a month ago, felt like a prison. Then she received an anonymous package. No return address. Inside was a printed spreadsheet. Data logs from the new version of ClearPath. Embedded in the metadata were tags labeled Risk Profile Exploit and Behavioral Intervention Trigger. A short note was scrawled in the margin. They're not helping people. They're testing them. Emily's hands trembled. She dug deeper. Using old developer credentials that hadn't yet been purged, she accessed a subdomain still connected to the app's backend. What she found horrified her. New features had been quietly implemented to measure user stress reactions, prompts, designed to manipulate spending behavior under emotional duress. They weren't guiding users. They were conditioning them. Helix had turned ClearPath into a psychological experiment. Emily reached out to Victor. He answered with one line, "You no longer have access to these discussions." Then the startup blogs turned. A leaked memo exposed Helix's internal directive. Leverage behavioral trends for maximum user monetization. Suddenly, Emily's face, once celebrated, was associated with betrayal. Articles asked, did Emily Barrett sell out? Was ClearPath always a Trojan horse? Her DMAs flooded with hate. Former fans accused her of greed, of selling them to the highest bidder. And for the first time in her life, Emily considered disappearing. She deleted her social media accounts. She stopped answering calls. She left Michael without a word, packed a bag, and took a one-way flight to a cabin in northern Oregon. In the quiet of the woods, surrounded by nothing but pine trees and guilt, she stared at the $100 million sitting idle in her offshore account and asked herself the question that echoed louder than anything else: what have I done? Then, one night, a single email arrived from a burner address. Subject: you were right to hesitate. Attached was a video file, a screen recording of a Helix internal meeting. The faces were blurred, but the voices were clear. Executives discussed how user data from ClearPath was being sold to insurance firms, payday lenders, and political marketing agencies. The phrase data-driven manipulation came up 6 times. At the end of the clip, one voice, unmistakably Victor's, said, "She served her purpose. Now let her fade." Emily didn't fade. She started planning. The air in the Oregon woods was thinner in November. Emily could see her breath now, even indoors. She wore layers, sweaters, coats, silence, and rarely spoke aloud. She had grown used to solitude, to hiding. But the video changed everything. The proof of exploitation was no longer a suspicion. It was a fact. And facts, Emily had learned, are dangerous when money is involved. She began compiling evidence. Not just the spreadsheet and the leaked recording, but her own digital trails, archived code commits, emails with Tara, calendar invites, board memos, even voicemail backups. Her cabin turned into a war room. She reconnected with a few old allies, engineers, analysts, ethics consultants who still believed in what ClearPath was meant to be. But the walls began closing in. Within days of her digital activity spiking, she received a cease and desist letter from Helix's legal team. The language was brutal. Any attempt to disclose internal documents or defame the company would result in a lawsuit for breach of contract and defamation exceeding $50 million. They reminded her of her NDA, her non-compete, her obligations. Then came the real threats. Her bank accounts were mysteriously frozen for compliance verification. Her name was quietly removed from several public-facing credits tied to ClearPath. Tech blogs stopped returning her messages. And then, one night, her cabin was broken into. Nothing was taken, but her files had been rifled through. Her hard drives were gone. She stood in the doorway the next morning, staring at the snow-covered footprints that vanished into the forest. A message had been sent. Loud and clear. Emily realized she had a choice: run, disappear forever with what remained of her, fortune and dignity, or fight. She chose to fight. She connected with the one person she never expected to trust, the whistleblower. He called himself Orion, a former data engineer at Helix who had been part of the integration team post-acquisition. He confessed that he had tried to speak up internally and had been demoted, surveilled, and finally fired without explanation. But he had saved everything: logs, call transcripts, internal Slack messages. He had even recorded meetings. Together, they built a timeline, a damning narrative that showed how Helix had mapped out the acquisition months before the offer, not to scale ClearPath ethically, but to weaponize it. They had seen the app's influence. They saw potential not in helping people, but in steering them, manipulating their behaviors for commercial outcomes, pushing certain users toward loans, others toward products, some toward political messaging. They didn't want a finance app. They wanted a behavioral engine. Emily went to the press. Not the mainstream outlets. They were too entangled with Helix through advertising and partnerships. She went underground. Podcasts, Substacks, independent journalists who specialized in tech accountability. And slowly the story caught fire. The hashtag ClearPathTruth began trending. Users shared their horror stories. Lawsuits followed. A class action suit emerged. Regulatory agencies launched inquiries. Helix stock wobbled. Their CEO denied everything. Victor disappeared from the public eye, but the cost was immense. Emily was sued in 3 different countries. Her personal life was stripped bare in court filings. Emails with Michael were read aloud on national television. Her mental health was dissected by strangers, and her accounts? Frozen again. Her $100 million fortune was reduced to legal fees and frozen assets. She lived off cryptocurrency and donations from supporters. And still, she didn't stop, because the damage they had done to the trust she built, to the users she swore to protect, was irreversible. She couldn't erase it, but she could. Expose it. By the time a federal ethics panel summoned her for testimony, Emily Barrett was no longer seen as a sellout, but a cautionary tale. A woman who built something beautiful, sold it too soon, and fought like hell to make it right. And as she sat before the panel, tired, poorer, but unbroken, she said words that would echo across the internet for weeks. I didn't sell a company. I sold trust. And now I'm here to buy it back, one truth at a time. The room fell silent. Thank you, truly, for staying with us this far. If you're still watching, you're part of a community that values truth, resilience, and redemption. And I promise you, the best and most shocking part of Emily's story is still ahead. There is a moment in every battle when silence becomes more powerful than noise. Emily Barrett stood in the eye of a storm she had unleashed. Lawsuits piled up. Former allies turned cold. Her bank account was a shadow of its former self. But, for the first time in years, she felt whole. She had nothing left to lose. The federal inquiry into Helix Dynamics intensified. Emily's testimony ignited a cascade of whistleblowers from within the company. Data scientists, compliance officers, even junior developers who had seen the dark side of Helix's so-called optimization engine. They came forward, one by one, confirming what Emily had risked everything to expose: behavioral manipulation on a massive scale. But Helix fought back. Hard. They hired crisis PR firms to smear her reputation, accused her of fabricating data, even released cherry-picked emails suggesting she was complicit from the start. A prominent news anchor called her an opportunist playing the victim. She received death threats, was heckled at public events. One morning, she woke to find her car windows smashed and a note taped to the steering wheel. You should have stayed rich and quiet. But Emily didn't break. Instead, she went further. Working with a small team of privacy advocates and cybersecurity experts, she launched Reclaim, a nonprofit initiative dedicated to reversing algorithmic harm. Their mission: to audit major tech products for ethical violations and return control of data to users. It started small: webinars, blog posts, consulting. But it grew fast. Too fast to ignore. And then it happened. An anonymous leak hit the internet. 347 internal documents from Helix Dynamics, revealing full-spectrum profiling of ClearPath users, including psychological manipulation, emotional scoring, and targeted interventions designed to increase ad revenue by predicting impulsive financial behavior. The documents were time-stamped, watermarked, and cross-verified by independent experts. The fallout was nuclear. Senate hearings were held. Helix's CEO was forced to resign. Multiple states launched lawsuits. A global boycott began. Users uninstalled Helix products in droves. The company's valuation plummeted by 68% in 3 months. And in the middle of it all was Emily Barrett. She didn't gloat. She didn't celebrate. She just kept working, quietly, patiently, unshaken. But the toll had been real. She had spent nearly every dollar of the $100 million. Not on luxuries or escapes, but on lawyers, whistleblower protection, forensic audits, and advocacy. She lived modestly now in a rented loft in a small city where no one recognized her. Her days were full of meetings. Her nights still haunted by the faces of the users she couldn't protect in time. One afternoon, while preparing a talk for an ethics conference, Emily received a message that stopped her cold. It was from the woman in Ohio, the single mother, who had once said ClearPath saved her life. The message read, "I deleted the new app after what they did. I just wanted to say thank you, not for building it, but for fighting for what it was meant to be. My daughter's 18 now. She's learning to budget, and she knows your name." Emily sat in silence for a long time. And then she cried, not for what she lost, but for what still might be possible. Because, in the end, ClearPath wasn't the product. She was the courage, the integrity, the will to fix what she broke. The $100 million was gone, but Emily Barrett had reclaimed something far more valuable, her purpose. Some sales don't buy freedom. They buy silence. And some people, like Emily, pay the ultimate price just to be heard again. Now I want to hear from you. If you were in Emily's position, would you have taken the money? Would you have fought back or disappeared? Let's talk in the comments. And if you want more true, unforgettable stories like this one, don't forget to subscribe and watch the next video we selected for you right here.